Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Janmadhyasya yatam vayaritalasjati swadhyasvaran Tene brahma vidaya adikavaye mujamija suraya Teja parimita jata vidimayo jata prati sarvamusya Dhamma svena sada nirahatakuhakam satyam param dhimai.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
Offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
Offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna
and the primeval cause of all causes. Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations. And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion. As one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen in fire or land seen on water. Only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature, appear factual although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Dharma Projita Kaitravudra Paramo Nirmatsaranam Satam Vedyam Vastavam Atra Vastu Shivadam Tapa Trayon Mulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamanu Krite Kimva Purer Ishwaraha Sadyo Hridi Avarudyate Tra Kriti Bihi Sususabhistakshana. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated. This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam sukhamukad amrita dravya samyutam pibata bhagavatam rasam alayam muhur aho raskabu vibhavakaha. O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desiratory Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful, although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Shinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridyantaksto Hi Bhadrani Vidunati Suhitsatam to hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures, or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita, is itself righteous activity. And for one who hears about Krishna, Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart, acts as a best-wishing friend and purifies a devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him. Nastapresu bhadresu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttamasloke bhaktir bhavati naistaki. In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge. As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam and from the devotees, he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord. Tadarajas tamo bhava kamalobhadayas cheye cheta etair navidam stitvam sattve prasiddhati. By development of devotional service, one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance, and thus material lust and avarice are diminished. Evam prasana manaso Bhagavat bhakti yogataha Bhagavat tattva vijnanam mukta sangasya jayate. When these impurities are wiped away, the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness, becomes enlivened by devotional service, and understands the science of God perfectly. Vidyate hridaya krantis Chityante sarva samsaya Siyante jasya karamani Drishta evatmanishvare. Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection and enables one to come at once to the stage of samsayam samagram, understanding of the Supreme Absolute Truth Personality of Godhead. Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness can one understand the science of Krishna. Srimad Bhagvatam, Canto 2, Chapter 3, verse number 16. Vaya sakischa Bhagavan Vasudeva Parayana Urugaya Gunodara Satam Shurhi Samagame. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Sukadeva Goswami, the son of Vyasadeva, was also full in transcendental knowledge and was a great devotee of Lord Krishna, son of Vasudeva. So there must have been discussion of Lord Krishna, who is glorified by great philosophers and in the company of great devotees. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The word satam is very important in this verse. Satam means the pure devotees, who have no other desire than to serve the Lord. Only in the association of such devotees are the transcendental glories of Lord Krishna properly discussed. It is said by the Lord that his topics are all full of spiritual significance. And once one properly hears about him in the association of the satam, certainly one senses the great potency and so automatically attains to the devotional stage of life. As already described, Maharaj Parikshit was a great devotee of the Lord from his very birth. And so also was Sukadeva Goswami. Both of them were on the same level, although it appeared that Maharaj Parikshit was a great king accustomed to royal facilities, whereas Sukadeva Goswami was a typical renouncer of the world, so much so that he did not even put a cloth on his body. Yeah, he walked naked. Superficially, Maharaja Parikshit and Sukadeva Goswami might seem to be opposites, but basically they were both unalloyed pure devotees of the Lord. When such devotees are assembled together, there can be no topic save discussions of the glories of the Lord, or bhakti yoga. In the Bhagavad Gita also, when there were talks between the Lord and his devotee Arjuna, there could not be any topic other than bhakti yoga. However, the mundane scholars may speculate on it in their own ways. The use of the word cha after Vyasaka suggests, according to Srila Jiva Goswami, that both Sukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit were of the same category, settled long before, although one was playing the part of the master and the other the disciple. Since Lord Krishna is the center of the topics, the word Vasudeva Parayana, or devotee of Vasudeva, suggests devotee of Lord Krishna. The common aim, although there were many others who assembled at the place where Maharaj Parikshit was fasting, the natural conclusion is that there was no topic other than the glorification of Lord Krishna, because the principal speaker was Sukadeva Goswami and the chief audience was Maharaj Parikshit. So, Srimad Bhagvatam, as it was spoken and heard by the two principal devotees of the Lord, is only for the glorification of the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Sukadeva Goswami, the son of Vyasadeva, was also full in transcendental knowledge and was a great devotee of Lord Krishna, son of Vasudeva. So there must have been discussion of Lord Krishna, who was glorified by great philosophers and in the company of great devotees. So this is a very interesting verse because it emphasizes the main themes that have been presented in this chapter. And the first theme is, of course, hearing from pure devotees. This has been repeated over and over again by Prabhupada because one cannot make any spiritual advancement unless they have the association of pure devotees. Because in the association of pure devotees, what happens? Well, this is explained in chapter 13, verse number 26. Anye tvevam ajananta shrutvan upasate tepi chatitarant mrityum shruti parayanaha. Again, there are those who, although not conversant in spiritual knowledge, begin to worship the Supreme Person upon hearing about him from others. Because of their tendency to hear from authorities, they also transcend the path of birth and death. So yesterday, there was an interesting discussion on the radio while I was driving to the farm. I usually don't listen to radio at all, but sometimes I'll turn it on just to be convinced I don't want to listen to it. But it's something interesting was on the radio. The number one atheist in the world was being interviewed. And I forget his first name. His second name is Dawkins. I think Richard Dawkins. Yeah. Of course, the dumbest people in the world are born in England. He's an Englishman. These are some of the dumbest people in the whole world. And Hawkins is the number one intelligentsia of atheism. You know, he's written so many books completely debunking the existence of God. That's why I said the dumbest people in the world are in England, and the most dangerous. Anyway, somebody called in and said, well, there's this man, his name is Myers, that's his last name. He said, he's just written a great book presenting the validity of the design, intellectual design, or what's the name of that? You have the institute here in Seattle. It's called. Anyways, they say that everything in nature is designed. Intelligent design. That's it. Yeah, intelligent design. And they said, and he was trying to convince Dawkins that he should have a debate with Myers, who's a top, let's say, philosopher in intelligent design. And he said, and Dawkins said, well, I don't talk to people like that, because that if I do agree to have a debate with a person like that, that just gives them some validity. But he's not really a scientist. He might be this or that, but he's not a real scientist. So I only debate with real scientists. So in other words, he very, let's say, deviously avoided getting into a direct discussion with a top intellectual design or intelligent design philosopher. And that's what they do. They're very arrogant people. Dawkins is the most arrogant person in the world, and he's an idiot. It's just like Prabhupada says. One time, there's this man in a lecture, when there was a question and answer period, he asked a question. He said, Srila Prabhupada, let's assume that there is no God. Then Prabhupada, stop. He said, wait a minute, I didn't ask my question. Let's assume that there is no God. Stop. So he wouldn't let him ask the question. And he said, well, why are you stopping me from asking the question? He said, because this question is illogical. He said, what do you mean it's illogical? He said, how can you assume that there's no God? That's like, let's assume that there's no Father. But how can you assume something that's illogical? Because everybody has a father and a mother, even the test tube baby. So how can you assume something that is illogical? Therefore, this is not a proper question. Well, Prabhupada's stopping that person from doing what? From speculating. He had perfect reason. But Dawkins refusing to debate with this man named Myers is basically being elusive. It's not being honest. Why should he not debate with him? Just because he doesn't have a PhD in science? That doesn't make him invalidated for a debate. He's written a fantastic book, just as good as any book Dawkins has ever written. So, therefore, he's a legitimate person to talk to. So you see, Prabhupada stopping the person from asking an illegitimate or illogical question is different than Dawkins refusing to speak to Myers. Dawkins is being a hypocrite by doing that. But Prabhupada was being perfectly logical by stopping that person from asking a totally speculative, illogical question. Okay. So, but that's what happens when you come into contact with a pure devotee. So, then the purport to this verse, 1326, Prabhupada says, this verse is particularly applicable to modern society because in modern society there's practically no education in spiritual matters. Well, that, again, he's touching on this theme that we talk about all the time, because he talks about it all the time. It's not that we're beating a dead cat or a dead dog. This is a live question, and it's a fact. There's no education in spiritual, practically no education in spiritual matters in modern society today. Why? Because, like Dawkins, everyone is prohibited in the schools from getting into serious discussions about the existence of God. They're prohibited. And just like Dawkins refuses to have a legitimate debate with an expert in intelligent design. They prohibit it. They think, oh, that would be belittling our position because this man is not a scientist. So this arrogance, this absolute arrogance of the so-called scientists and so-called the scientific philosophers is appalling. Anyway, it says, this verse is particularly applicable to modern society because in modern society there's practically no education in spiritual matters. Some of the people may appear to be atheistic or agnostic or philosophical, but actually there's no knowledge of philosophy. Just like that man asking the question, let's assume that there's no God. That's nonsense. How can you assume there's no God? That's like assuming there's no Father. It doesn't exist. It's an illusion, such a thought. Right? Some of the people may appear to be atheistic or agnostic or philosophical, but actually there's no knowledge of philosophy. What is philosophy? Well, we won't take the definition. Look up the definition of philosophy. They usually say it's the love of knowledge or wisdom. Knowledge of the love of truth or something like that. What does it say?
It said the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality and existence, especially when considered as an academic discipline. So that's one.
Yeah.
That's the main.
Look up the original meaning of the Greek word. Philosophy. Philos means love of truth. Look up the etymological origin of that word.
Love of wisdom.
Love of wisdom, yeah.
Greek word.
That's the Greek word, right? What is the highest wisdom? It's Bhagavad Gita, right? So they read the translation. Read again the meaning they give to philosophy. Yeah. What's it say?
The study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence, especially when considered as an academic discipline.
Okay, so see, this is a misrepresentation. They're using the right words, but what they end up with is an illusory representation, not the real thing. So when Prabhupada says, but actually there's no knowledge of philosophy. Okay, so why does he say that? Because they claim that there's no God. And they claim that matter is the only reality. Therefore, what they're teaching is false. There's much more reality than matter. Matter is a temporary reality. There's an absolute reality that's never dies. It's eternal. And they're rejecting that whole thing. See, they say that doesn't exist. That's a fairy tale. This is only matter. So they're not actually studying reality. That's why he says that there's no knowledge of philosophy. As for the common man, if he is a good soul, then there is a chance for advancement by hearing. This hearing process is very important. Lord Chaitanya, who preached Krishna consciousness in the modern world, gave great stress to hearing because if the common man simply hears from authoritative sources, he can progress, especially according to Lord Chaitanya. If he hears the transcendental vibration, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It is stated, therefore, that all men should take advantage of hearing from realized souls and gradually become able to understand everything. So, we're not hearing from realized souls in public schools and colleges and even private schools. We're hearing from speculators. And they're speculating things that are illogical. They're coming up with illogical conclusions. There's no God, everything started from a big bang, and there's only matter. Spirit is a fantasy to help people who are psychologically weak. It's the way they present spiritual knowledge, right? Or as Marx says, the opium of the people. Religion is the opium of the people. So these are all demons. They're all nonsense people. And one should not hear from them. And that's the whole point. It says, again, there are those who, although not conversant in spiritual knowledge, begin to worship the Supreme Person upon hearing about him from others. Because of their tendency to hear from authorities, they also transcend the path of birth and death. So, these false people are presenting themselves as authorities about reality. Read that definition again. Of philosophy. What's it say?
The study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence, especially when considered as an academic discipline.
Okay, right away the word academic makes it nonsense. What do they mean by academic? They mean speculation. Question everything. Question even if God exists. Well, Prabhupada stopped the man from asking that question because that's not logical, that God does not exist. Right? So they're starting from an illogical position, claiming to be logical. Claiming to be authorities. They're not authorities of anything. They can't even stop themselves from passing stool and urine. So how can there be any authority about the origin of creation?
And all the three things that they mentioned, knowledge, reality, and existence. They're ignoring the spiritual knowledge. They're ignoring
Spiritual reality and spiritual existence. Yeah.
And the reality. We're not the body, but they start with the body.
Yeah. You see, so everything they're saying is illogical and false. But yet, they're considered to be authorities. That's why Prabhupada says, there's no knowledge of philosophy. But actually, there's no knowledge of philosophy. So then, it says, the worship of the Supreme Lord will then undoubtedly take place if you hear from realized souls and gradually become able to understand everything. Lord Chaitanya has said that in this age, no one needs to change his position, but one should give up the endeavor to understand the absolute truth by speculative reasoning. Okay, Mr. Dawkins' new name is Mr. Speculator #1. Say, speculative reasoning. Yeah, they're reasoning, but the whole reasoning thread is false. One should learn to become the servant of those who are in knowledge of the Supreme Lord. Yeah, instead of serving people like Dawkins, we should serve pure devotees. Otherwise, we'll be misled. If one is fortunate enough to take shelter of a pure devotee, hear from him about self-realization, and follow in his footsteps, one will be gradually elevated to the position of a pure devotee. In this verse, particularly, the process of hearing is strongly recommended. And this is very appropriate. But it's strongly recommended to hear from pure devotees, not just hear from some upstart nonsense. In this verse particularly, the process of hearing is strongly recommended, and this is very appropriate. Although the common man is often not as capable as so-called philosophers, faithful hearing from an authoritative person will help one transcend this material existence and go back to Godhead, back to home. So Dawkins is definitely not going back to Godhead. He doesn't believe it exists. So how could he go back to Godhead? And he's not hearing from authorities. He refuses to hear from authorities by claiming due to his out of control, on steroids, false ego, that he's an authority. He's not an authority of anything. You see? And this is the problem today. The people are accepting these fools, these absolute idiots, as authorities, and hearing from them and refusing to hear from real authorities. Just like he refuses to hear from Myers, who's an authority on intelligent design, with the lame excuse that, oh, he's not a scientist, therefore I will only give him some validity by, in other words, if I accept to have a debate with him, I'll give him some validity as an authority, and I'm not going to do that. You see, this is their game. This is their strategy, is to denounce and vilify and belittle anybody who has a different opinion than they do. Therefore, Mr. Dawkins is the #1 representative of the cancel culture. Do you know what cancel culture is? Anybody know?
Rejecting all the past.
Rejecting traditional knowledge or bona fide knowledge and trying to replace it with some false assumptions. See? So they cancel things. They say, oh, we're not going to talk to them. Oh, they're not authorities. Oh, they're not scientists. We're scientists. They're not scientists. They don't have a PhD. You know, all that nonsense. And therefore, although the common man is often not as capable as so-called philosophers, faithful hearing from an authoritative person will help one transcend this material existence and go back to Godhead, back to home. So we should decide what is our goal. Then again, in the 11th chapter, 36th verse, it says, Arjuna said, O master of the senses, the world becomes joyful upon hearing your name. And thus, everyone becomes attached to you. What's your name? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Although the perfected beings offer you their respectful homage, the demons are afraid, and they flee here and there, and this is rightly done. So, in the purport, Prabhupada says, Arjuna, after hearing from Krishna about the outcome of the battle at Kurukshetra, he became enlightened. And as a great devotee and friend of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he said that everything done by Krishna is quite fit. Yes. Where does he say that? He says that in the 10th chapter, verse number 14. Sarvam itad itam ritam manye yanman vadasi keshava nahite bhagavan vyaktim vidur nadanava. O Krishna, I totally accept as truth all that you have told me. Neither the demigods nor the demons, O Lord, can understand your personality. Yeah, so we should put neither the demigods or the demons like Dawkins, O Lord, can understand your personality. And that's a fact. If you want to talk fact, there you are. That's a fact. So this is 10:14. So, purport. After hearing from Krishna about the outcome of the battle of Kurukshetra, Arjuna became enlightened. And as a great devotee and friend of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he said that everything done by Krishna is quite fit. Arjuna confirmed that Krishna is the maintainer and object of worship for the devotees and the destroyer of the undesirables. His actions are equally good for all. Yeah, when he destroys the undesirables is actually a good thing. Arjuna understood herein that when the battle of Kurukshetra was being concluded, in outer space there were present many demigods, siddhas, and the intelligentsia of the higher planets, and they were observing the fight because Krishna was present there. When Arjuna saw the universal form of the Lord, the demigods took pleasure in it. But others, who were demons and atheists, could not stand it when the Lord was praised. out of their natural fear of the devastating form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they fled. Krishna's treatment, see, the demigods were thrilled seeing the universal form, and the demons became afraid and they ran away. Krishna's treatment of the devotees and the atheists is praised by Arjuna. In all cases, a devotee glorifies the Lord because he knows that whatever he does is good for all. Okay? And then again, there is more information, and that is the 10th chapter, 18th verse, in which it says, O Janardhan, again please describe in detail the mystic power of your opulences. I am never satiated in hearing about you, for the more I hear, the more I want to taste the nectar of your words. So this is the culture of the devotees. The more I hear, the more I want to taste the nectar of your words. This is the culture of the devotees. They're not interested in mundane things, mundane knowledge. They're not excited by it. They get excited by hearing about Krishna. The Bhagavatam is all about Krishna. Bhagavad Gita is all about Krishna. So these are real literatures. The other literatures, things written by Dawkins and all these other speculators, that's crowbait. That's subject matter for crows. Crows eat stool. So the stool eaters, they like all this mundane speculative knowledge and books. And there's millions of books of speculation. You go to a library, it's full of millions of books of speculation. You go to the Seattle Library, which has branches all over the state. It's all full of, all those books are full of speculation. Very few of them have any bona fide knowledge in them. Okay, so now as far as Amritam or nectar is concerned, any narration or statement concerning Krishna is just like nectar. And this nectar can be perceived by practical experience. Modern stories, however, and fiction and histories are different from the transcendental pastimes of the Lord in that one will tire of hearing mundane stories, but one never tires of hearing about Krishna. It is for this reason only that the history of the whole universe is replete with references to the pastimes of the incarnations of Godhead. The Puranas are histories of bygone ages that relate the pastimes of the various incarnations of the Lord. In this way, the reading matter remains forever fresh. Okay, so this is real knowledge. And what these other people are teaching is not knowledge, it's ignorance. But they put the label knowledge on it. And what is it? They're talking about reality and... Yeah, knowledge, reality, and existence. Yeah, it's total misrepresentation. Okay, now, what is knowledge, reality, and existence? Well, the 13th chapter itself is the real presentation of knowledge, reality, and existence. So, Prabhupada says, in the purport to the last verse, 13:35, he says, well, the verse, first of all, says, those who see with eyes of knowledge, jnana chaksus, eyes of knowledge, the difference between the body and the knower of the body, and can also understand the process of liberation from bondage in material nature, attain to the supreme goal. Okay? So you want to know knowledge, reality, and existence, you have to read the 13th chapter. And then Prabhupada says in the purport of this 13th chapter is that one should know the distinction between the body and the owner of the body and the supersoul. So three things. body, which is a material thing, right? The owner of the body, which is a spiritual thing, that's the living entity, the jiva. But not only the jiva, it's the jiva and it's Paramatma. And the supersoul, or Paramatma. Okay, so you have the body, the owner of the body, which is often understood as the jiva, but actually you have to say Paramatma also, because Paramatma is the real owner. The jiva is only the temporary owner. And then the Paramatma, or supersoul. Okay, so you have to know these three things. So once you recognize the process, that is the body, the owner of the body, and the supersoul. One should recognize the process of liberation. So process of liberation. As described in verses 8 through 12. So that's 20 or 18 points of knowledge. All right? Once you recognize the process of liberation as described in verses 8 through 12, then one can go on to the supreme destination. It's a supreme destination. We have to know what the supreme destination is of life. Okay? So now he says, a faithful person should at first have some good association to hear of God. So number one, it's good association to hear of God. Okay? And thus gradually become enlightened. If one accepts a spiritual master, one can learn to distinguish between matter and spirit. So the first thing one learns is matter, what is matter, and what is spirit, from the spiritual master, right? That's the beginning of spiritual knowledge, and that's Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter. And that becomes the stepping stone for further spiritual realization. A spiritual master, by various instructions, teaches his students to get free from the material concept of life. So this is what the spiritual master is trying to teach. Get free from the material conception of life. This is what the false so-called philosophers and scientists are teaching. How to become more entrenched by the material conception of life. Now we're going to go over this very deeply now. For instance, in Bhagavad Gita, we find Krishna instructing Arjuna to free him from material considerations. Then, one can understand that this body is matter. So the body is matter, right? That's the first point. It can be analyzed with its 24 elements. Okay, so what are the 24 elements? So you have the Mahabhutas, the 5 great elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether. Right? Then you have the 5 senses: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin. Then you have the 5 objects of the senses: seeing, tasting, feeling or touching, seeing, and smelling. Okay? And then you have the you have the 5 senses for acquiring knowledge. Then you have the 5 objects of the senses. Then you have the 5 working or the five working senses. Those are hands. Well, actually, it's it's the voice, the anus, the legs, the hands, and the genitals, or reproductive organs. Okay, and then you have the subtle senses, which begins with the mind, which is like the sense within. And then you have the intelligence, which is the discriminative factor. And then you have the false ego. Okay? So then, besides that, so that's 23. Then the 24th is the Mahatattva, or the what's called the unmanifested stage of the three modes of nature. Pradhan, yeah, well, the manifest stage of Pradhan is Mahatattva, and then Pradhana is the unmanifest stage. Okay, the three modes of nature. All right, so then this is 24 elements, or the aggregate of all those things. Above that, and then further, you have what's called the interactions, which are representations of the five great elements. And those are desire, hatred, happiness, and distress. And then you have what's called the living symptoms, which is consciousness and convictions. Okay, so the living symptoms are manifestations of the subtle body, of the mind, ego, and intelligence, whereas the desire, hatred, happiness, and distress are interactions and representations of the five great elements in the gross body. Okay, then the five great elements are also a gross representation of the false ego, which in turn represents what's called the primal stage of false ego, technically called materialistic conception, or the tamasa buddhi, intelligence in ignorance. This is the name. This is basically calling out Dawkins. He's intelligence in ignorance, and he's teaching what? The material conception of life. And what is that material conception of life? Well, it says, when a person becomes Krishna conscious, he realizes that the material world is full of illusory and false things. Gradually, he becomes detached from affection for society, friendship, and love, which often lead to deception and frustration. In material life, one is subject to the laws of karma, and one cannot avoid its reactions. The modern civilization is attempting to avoid the miseries of life, like birth, old age, disease, and death, by advancement of material scientific knowledge. These attempts only entrench people more into the material conception of life, with the false hope of achieving material peace, happiness, and love. Rather, they experience more complicated life situations and miseries, and only have temporary pleasures, which are more lust than real love. The intelligence of the materialist becomes corrupted by continual activities prompted by passion and ignorance. They become convinced that the goal of life is sense gratification. This distracts the mind from the pursuit of self-realization, which should result in the realization one is the eternal servant of Krishna, and thus one should engage in his loving devotional service. Such misconception of life diverts one's attention to pursuing the attempt to acquire more and more money, so that one may have unrestricted sense enjoyment. Thus one is overwhelmed by the material conception of life, which is summarized as follows. 1. Attachment to the objects of sense gratification. 2. One is preoccupied by many material desires, and when one is frustrated, he develops hatred and envy. 3. One seeks happiness outside of himself by enticing victims for his sense gratification. He seeks the company of other persons suffering from the same illusions. He dislikes the feeling of loneliness and seclusion as long as he feels successful in materialistic society. 4. He has a tendency to overindulge in eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. 5. He loses control over the activities of the senses and the mind. 6. Due to identifying oneself with the temporary body rather than the eternal soul within the body, he develops the false ego that he is the body and identifies himself with temporary designations of family, race, ethnicity, nationalism, etc. 7. He tries to prolong his existence in the temporary body by material strategies of diet, bodybuilding, supplements, plastic surgery, and other medical procedures. 8. Because of all his misconceptions, he develops the false ego and becomes falsely proud of his temporary material achievements. 9. He is never satisfied, and whenever he is frustrated in achieving his material goals, he becomes angry and resentful and always blames others for his failures. 10. When he cannot get as much sense gratification as he wants, he becomes angry and delusional in his behavior. 11. He over-endeavors to acquire material sense objects and always seeks to be praised for his material possessions and achievements. 12. He becomes completely entangled and attached excessively to material things, and in his total state of bewilderment, loses all interest in spiritual knowledge and God-related pursuits. 13. His mind then is overwhelmed by material considerations, and he becomes continually anxious and fearful as he gets older, sick, and approaches death. That is the material conception of life. There are probably other things also. And then, so one who can understand the 24 material elements in detail, along with their interactions, should study this philosophy in more detail. In Bhagavad Gita, a summary only is given. So you have to go to Srimad Bhagvatam, where there's more detail about the 24 elements. You see, the body is the representation of all these factors, and there are changes of the body, which are 6 in number. The body is born, it grows, it stays, it produces byproducts, and then it dwindles or decays, and at last it vanishes. Therefore, the field is a non-permanent material thing, meaning the body and material nature is a non-permanent material thing. Well, not nature, but the material body is a non-permanent material thing. However, the Kshetrajna, the knower of the field, its proprietor, is different, because the knower of the field is eternal, the soul. So, there are 3 stages of the material conception of life. 1 is negligence of spiritual life because of too much attachment to material pleasures. 2, fear of eternal spiritual personal identity that gives rise to the mistaken concept that one may merge into the homogeneous oneness of the impersonal light called the Brahman effulgence. And 3, or the conception of void after death that comes from frustration in life and from which one develops disbelief in everything, being angry at all sorts of spiritual speculation out of hopelessness. One may adopt different forms of intoxication, and any hallucinations one may experience are accepted spiritual visions. And then another aspect of accepting the material conception of life is the perverted material understanding one develops of the different species of life due to ignorance of the soul. One sees only the different types of bodies of living beings: dog, cat, man, elephant, insect, fish, bird, etc. The reality is that the individual soul in each species of life has nothing to do with the incidental bodies that entrap him. one receives a material body according to the different unfulfilled desires of the previous life and karma, the good and bad reactions of activities. So, this is all, in aggregate, the material conception of life, or this tamasa buddhi, intelligence and ignorance. This is the description of people like Dawkins. Their intelligence is only in ignorance. It has nothing to do with reality, existence, and knowledge, real knowledge. Right? Okay, so we'll stop right there. Are there any questions? So we analyze the body. This is all 13th chapter, verse 6 and 7, the analysis of the body, which has 24 elements, plus the interactions, plus the convictions and consciousness, the living symptoms. And then there's the process of knowledge, 18 principles of knowledge. Anything besides that is called ignorance. And then there's the supreme destination. It's going back to Godhead. This is real knowledge. This is what our kids should learn. Instead, they're learning about, the bones and the veins and the ligaments and the tendons and all that nonsense. Okay, that has some value if you want to become a doctor and perform operations and things like that. But it has nothing to do with getting you liberated from the material world. Okay, we'll stop right there. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.